Well, it's that time of the year. As the Lord spoketh, this year, for my birthday, buy as much stuff as you possibly can. Or maybe spread that out over 8 nights or something like that. So here's a bunch of stuff you can subtly hint for, or buy with the money you got returning those god-awful sweaters your sister-in-law got you. Number 1. Remote ID module. Just kidding. Number 2. Servo Tester. People often underestimate how handy this often overlooked tool can be. There's few things that can delay a build as much as having to find a receiver, plug it in, bind it, only to find out that your servo is dead. And even if the servo isn't dead, these come in handy for centering it. Buy one, they're inexpensive. Number 3. Transmitter box. While not the most exciting product, this is an essential on our list because it doubles as transmitter protection and storage for miscellaneous tools, glue, batteries, and secrets from your family. Back in the old days, these weren't as necessary because everyone had field boxes for their glow planes, but as the hobby shifted away from glow, a lot of people found themselves just having 15 items loose in the back of their car. These get pricey quickly, at least if you go to the name brand route. Harbor Freight has some other solutions to save a few bucks. You should also consider getting some transmitter stick protectors on Amazon for $8. If you want to be extra tactical, you can often find cheap Pelican cases at surplus industrial supply stores which have room for your Oakleys and titanium spork. Number 4. Magnet pull. If you haven't lost an important screw at your field, you will. A magnet pull should be in your transmitter box at all times, or at least in your car or tool bag. And you'll probably never need it, until you forget it. This has saved our asses so many times, we really can't recommend this enough. Number 5. Alligator Ear forceps. These kind of look like forceps at one end and like a tiny robotic snake at the other, but they are great for pulling wires through wings or anywhere else you need to fish stuff through. Number 6. Model Cradle. These aren't just for showing off that you have more money than everyone else at the field as the bling guy, these make assembling your model infinitely easier. Remember our Bronco review? You had to flip the plane to be able to screw in bolts to the wing. Without a model cradle, we found ourselves consistently creating hanger rash on it. Number 7. Battery checker. Not only is this nice when your pile of batteries gets mixed up, this is great for when you first buy an aircraft and need to figure out what you set your timer for. They're inexpensive enough that if you ask anyone more than once to use theirs, you're a mooch. Number 8. Extra gyro or 3. This assumes you don't already put a gyro in everything, and if you do, that's okay. But sometimes, you go to a swap meet and pick up a cool-looking F-35, and it turns out it flies like a fish with wings. Adding a gyro to a plane that flies poorly can sometimes make it fly less poorly. Number 9. Prop Reamer. While your drill with a bit works just fine, it's usually not an item to bring with you to the field. Good for you if you do, but for the rest of us without an infinite amount of trunk space, go get yourself a prop reamer and leave it in your transmitter box. Not to mention, the saying, right tool for the job absolutely applies here. While people often bring spare props with them to the field, figuring out how to get that prop onto the aircraft is often overlooked. For that reason, you might also want to add a prop wrench as well. Number 10. A nice soldering setup. This is one of the few instances in our hobby where money can buy some amount of skill. Oftentimes, people think they're terrible at soldering because their soldering job just looks bad, but in reality, they had a terrible iron, solder, and flux which held them back. A cheap iron has no temperature control, so it's cold 1 second, then too hot the next, burning away the flux and oxidizing the solder. A good iron stays at the right temperature, melting the metal quickly and letting the flux do its job. Our go-to iron is the Duratrax Track Power TK950. But check out the Pinesil, which has all sorts of cool features including USB-C power and an accelerometer to turn on and off automatically when you pick it up or put it down. Number 11. A sunblocker. These can often be homemade. Get a pole and a paper plate, or a tripod and a frisbee, or an umbrella and a patient tall man. Set it up so the disc covers the sun in your peripheral vision, and it will become far easier to fly with the sun in front of you. Number 12. Sunglasses. Buy a few pairs in case you lose your nice ones and keep them in the car. Nothing causes a premature trip home more often than not being able to see your planes because it's too f***ing bright outside. Number 13. Screw Assortment Set. You'll probably lose your magnet stick at some point or another, and that's why it's essential to have a small screw assortment set. Or, sometimes a plane comes with a screw or two missing, and we're not talking about the twimber, and having that assortment set means the difference between being able to stay home or take an embarrassing trip into the Home Depot carrying whatever the hell this is. Number 14. A good old-fashioned table. There's few things that'll upset those around you as quickly as CA stains on the living room table. But tables are expensive for something that's just going to get destroyed. So maybe consider some of those folding tables for extra space, or even making your own DIY table out of an old door and some legs. Number 15. Acetone. Not for huffing, but for removing CA off your fingers or the floor, or the walls if those fumes really got to your head. Number 16. Lights. You never know when an impromptu night flying session may occur, so it's always best to have a pair or two laying around so you don't feel left out. Or, sometimes a flying day doesn't quite feel like it's over despite the sun saying it is. We keep a pair of easily removable ones laying around so we can switch them between our planes and don't have to spend a lot of time setting it up. Number 17. Zend Tool. While not as important now as a few years ago, there's still quite a few kits and NARFs out there that don't come with push rods pre-bent. Instead of throwing the push rod into pliers and committing unspeakable acts to it, you could be done with the bend in a matter of a few seconds with a Zend Tool. Plus, if you ever plan on getting into scratch building, these are a necessity to own. Also, this really speeds up one of our favorite activities, which is constructing cursed flying machines from garbage. Number 18. Plastic hinge inserts, hinge tabs, and Teflon tape. Eventually there will come a time when a control surface decides to divorce its airframe. Since all these items are cheap and easy to fit in a transmitter box, you really have no excuse to end the day because a control surface left the chat. Number 19. A Multirotor. This is another fun niche of our hobby that can also be useful to RC pilots. Sometimes, your plane flies deep into the woods and you can't find it on foot. Having someone or yourself with a quadcopter to find it from the sky can be the difference between a total loss, a Where's Waldo search, and a puzzle. Look around and you can often find a used Mavic DJI Air Mini that's a generation or two behind that somebody bought and flew twice and got rid of like they all do, and you can get it for a significantly reduced price. Even a 5-year-old quad in good shape can still do some amazing things. Number 20. Crash alarm. Speaking of trees, a more budget-friendly option for finding a crashed aircraft can be a crash alarm. Just be sure to have a way to get your aircraft out of the tree if you install one, because otherwise, an alarm will just be blaring from a tree continually until your battery dies, annoying everyone at the field. Ask us how we know this. Number 21. A transmitter muff and some heat packs. Your face will still be freezing, but your fingers won't. Nothing is more difficult than trying to land your plane with frostbitten digits. Just be sure to set up a throttle cut, so if you accidentally bump the throttle taking your hand in or out of it, the prop won't cut off or into someone else's fingers. Or have someone else plug the plane in once your hands are in the muff. Either way. Number 22. Adapters. It's always a better idea to just keep all your batteries and ESCs with the same connectors. But sometimes, you might have left your packs at home and need to borrow someone else's battery. But wait, their pack uses a different connector. Not to fear though, you remembered you have adapters. Again, these are great in a pinch, but these can be a point of failure, so it's best to only use these when you really need them. Number 23. Airplane storage solutions. It's very easy to make your hangar go from cluttered to a borderline hoarding situation. Planes take up a lot of space, and it's one of the easiest things you can do to keep your space looking tidy. There's everything out there from DIY wall racks to simply hanging your plane by the prop from the ceiling. It all depends on how much money and effort you want to put into it. Number 24. String. You never know when an impromptu glider towing session will happen, and if you often fly a Cub or similar, there's nothing wrong with always being prepared. Just make sure it's not a poor man's string and is capable of some level of pulling force depending on what's being towed. Number 25. Apple AirTag. There's a lot of cheaper options out there for sure, but having a GPS somewhere on your RC plane can make finding it in the event of a flyaway a lot easier. We haven't done this in years, but know of many people who have benefited from it, especially with quads. Number 26. A quality flight simulator. This is especially helpful at the beginning of your journey in RC, but Ben and I still find ourselves experimenting on flight sims to this day. Yes, it's not quite the same thing as real life, but if it's raining outside and you are really looking forward to practicing not losing orientation while torque rolling, it certainly won't hurt anything. Just promise us you won't quit the RC hobby entirely to go to simulators. Our personal favorite is Aerofly, but a lot of other people favor Real Flight. There's also free alternatives out there, although we can't vouch for them as we haven't tried them. Every sim has its strengths and weaknesses, so give several a shot if money isn't an issue, or if you have a friend that owns one that you haven't tried yet. Now, if this list is a little overwhelming, don't forget that you really don't need any of these items to have a good time in our hobby. They just make things a little bit easier at times. Go ahead and give this video a like if you've enjoyed it, and hit subscribe if you're interested in watching us compare different flight simulators. Happy landings, bounce one on for us, and we'll catch you next week with a new upload.